Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We have a day full of some exciting sessions around product-led growth. And we have some amazing speaker lineup from some of the finest consumer internet companies in India and abroad. Um, and, um, and just to give you some introduction, I'm the co-founder and CEO of MoEngage. Um, and I wanted to kind of give a quick introduction before we get started. So I want to quickly give some background and context about Hash Growth and also the Hash Growth Product Summit, why we are doing this. So Hash Growth is a community initiative from MoEngage. We started this in early 2019. Having worked with many consumer internet companies over the last 6-7 years, we have seen that there is lack of a good community for growth product owners and marketing teams for sharing and learning best practices from each other. Having seen and heard of this problem, and having seen many product leaders and marketing teams reinvent many of the things again and again, we've seen that why not build a platform where people can learn from each other and share these best practices so that all of us can grow faster and all of us don't need to reinvent the wheel. So that's been the premise of the Hash Growth initiative that we have taken last year. We have now built a community of more than about 20,000 people across, including product owners, managers, entrepreneurs, marketing managers, CLM owners, and so on. And it's great to see how we have been evolving this community on a yearly basis. Last year we have done like close to 20 plus events and workshops and mixers. And this year we have taken it virtual. And Hashgraph Product Summit is is a key virtual summit that we are doing this year. And it is majorly focused towards product-led growth. How can we drive growth with product-led strategies, and more focused and tuned towards product managers and product owners, and even growth team members, and entrepreneurs, of course. And we have carefully kind of curated some of the and we carefully curated the practitioners so that we can actually get you the learnings and best practices from people who execute, and then just providing you a high level guide, right? So that's been the overall thesis of the Hashgraph Product Summit. You will and these are some of the things that you can expect to take away. So we focused on right from product onboarding to how you kind of look at your setup in terms of the team, people, processes, and tools for product-led growth. How can collaboration happen very well between product growth and marketing teams? And we also have an exciting session with ShareChat and Flipkart product leaders talking about how can they drive engagement at 100 million plus user scale using by building the right kind of capabilities and so on, and also how to leverage on that. So these are some of these things that we're going to cover today. And before we go into this, and before we go into the session we have with Anand, which will be going to start in a few minutes. Before we do that, I want to give a quick introduction about MoEngage, and I'll try to keep it as much brief as possible. For people who don't know, MoEngage is an insights-led customer engagement company. We started off in mid of 2014. I and my co-founder have built a consumer company before this for between 2011 and 14. We have seen the challenges of driving user engagement and growth ourselves, and seeing the problem in the ecosystem and the landscape. We started MoEngage from our own learnings and pain points that we have seen. What we call it as insights-led engagement platform because MoEngage is an integrated platform with where product owners and marketing owners can analyze customer behavior, segment based on those behavior and insights, act on those insights in the same platform by orchestrating highly personalized interactions across mobile, email, web, and other channels, and then optimize towards the user engagement and relevant feature adoption or product adoption, and also measure the impact of those engagements that you're nudging, and then also kind of create this growth loop, right? So we call this as a growth feedback loop, and through which you can actually kind of drive growth at the same time be highly customer obsessed. So MoEngage, the premise is to enable consumer brands to become more customer obsessed, because we feel that in the today's world, every brand needs to be highly customer obsessed, and we are providing a platform that enables you to do what you want to do. We work with 1,000 plus customers across various industries, e-commerce, retail, and of travel and mobility, telecommunications, media entertainment, financial services, edtech, gaming. These are some of our main customers that we work with. We work with large enterprises, Fortune 500 companies, as well as today's fast-growing internet companies, as well as a lot of early stage startups as well. So we have about 1,000 plus customers across various verticals that we work with. And we also have been named as a global leader in customer engagement by Gartner, Forrester, and also at G2. And we are proud of building a global customer engagement company from India as well. So that's a quick background about MoEngage. I don't want to spend too much time on this. And I just want to kind of quickly touch upon this Hashgraph Academy. What we also have seen is that we have been doing a lot of this, some of these courses and some of these events. We also wanted to have more deep dive courses, which could be very valuable for product managers, marketing managers, and everyone, so that they can actually kind of learn more deeper level best practices. So we launched courses and training and certification programs, and you can access those through our Hashgraph Academy as well. We feel these are going to be very valuable, and so the PhonePe, this specific success story is one of my favorites, and I think definitely you can sign up, and we are giving all of this content for free, so please feel free to sign up as well. So that's a quick background, and I'll probably stop there and then start our session with Anand. Hi Anand, can you hear me?
Hi Ravi.
Yep. Thanks, Anand. Yes, I can hear you well. Firstly, thanks for joining us late in the night from the Bay Area. And we really appreciate you taking time for the community.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Great. So to start with, I'm going to give some brief introduction about Anand, and then we can get started. Anand had been a serial product leader and an entrepreneur himself. He has led at least 5 products globally with 10 million plus users, and one at least 1 billion plus users. He also co-founded Aeroprice in the States, and which was acquired by BMC Software. He is currently the executive vice president of product management at Five9, which is a global company in the cloud contact center space, and which is also a public company. He's also, before Five9, he was most recently the director of messenger platform for Facebook, where he has grown the messaging developer community to more than 350K plus developers. Before that, he was also the chief product officer for Snapdeal during the growth phase, and where he led the Snapdeal growth. Prior to that, he was a chief product officer at Airtel, during the and when he drove new products like Wink, Airtel, Money, and then drove the digital transformation of the Airtel group. And earlier to that, he led multiple products at Yahoo. He's also a part-time seed investor. For people who don't know, he invested probably, I don't know the number exactly. I think I'll let him answer that in this call today. Of which some of them have, and of which one of MoEngage is also is also a company in which he invested in, for all full disclosure, and of which 10 of his startups have investments have grown to 100 million plus valuation, and some have grown to a billion plus valuation as well. So I'll stop there in terms of, I think, the introduction, and we can get started.
Great.
So to probably start with as icebreaker, Anand, I think you've led products both in consumer space as well as the B2B space, and also you led products in India as well as in the US. What have you seen some like stark differences in terms of how both countries? I mean, both. Uh, what have you seen as the stark differences between in these two areas? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for having me, Ravi, and really appreciate the warm introduction. I would say, I really like feel like, if you watch one of those war movies and, the bombs are going off, they'll always like one guy sitting in the back, like still smoking a cigar while everyone is like running around, because the bombs are exploding. And this
Yep.
guy like seen the bombs explode so many times that he's like, I'll get up when the action really starts, right? So you always got one guy like that. And I nowadays like start feeling like that guy, having sort of been around the block for a few different cycles. But I think 2020 reminded us that regardless of what we think we know, there's always like a new set of circumstances where like almost everything that you learned, you have to like unlearn and throw out of the window and like start freshly with the data that you're seeing.
Yep.
So it's amazing how kind of in technology there's no such thing as a playbook you can constantly reuse. But that said, there's a lot of frameworks that you can reapply and rather than making a cold start. So yeah, I mean, and the other thing I would say is it's great to see MoEngage do so well since the first time we met, like whatever 4 5 years or so back.
Yep.
And you guys are now a Gartner MQ leader and stuff like that. So congratulations. In terms of your question, I would say there are probably like three or four big things, right? Like one is for anyone who built products, in the Western Hemisphere, you're used to first building for iOS, right? That's probably the biggest one that is different. Like in India, you'd probably be
Yep.
building for 5 to 10% of your customer base if you were iOS first. And that's probably the biggest thing that like surprised me, and I had to like unlearn and learn. And on Android, there's just like so many other things to kind of unlearn from the iOS ecosystem and do
Yep.
differently for Android. One thing I remember, which used to be a standing joke when I was at Airtel. So as some of the folks probably know, like I was in India building products between 2013 and 2017. And one of the things that was very funny was that I wanted to carry around a device that the most number of users used, which ended up being Jelly Bean OS. And so I
Yep.
carried around this like really old Android phone, and everyone thought it was a joke because like for whatever reason I didn't want to buy a new phone. And I would always like test all the products that we built on like 3 generations old Android phones. And so like people started QAing on that device because they knew I had that device, and they had to otherwise I'll be like reporting all the common bugs. And so
Yep.
it sort of was a artificial way to make people act as if most of the users acted. And so some of the keys won't even work and all that because the phones aged very quickly, right? The OS probably was still okay. Um,
Yep.
so that's probably like one of the biggest things I saw. And the other thing I would say is like probably the number one thing I remember from the Indian ecosystem is the hustle and the drive,
Yeah.
compared to any other part of the world I've been a part of. That's true of founders, that's true of product leaders and so on. But that's also a double-edged sword, right? Like the hustle can be used in a positive direction, and it can also be kind of working against the company itself sometimes.
Yes.
So those are probably the two big things that I remember.
Makes sense. And B2C versus B2B, anything that you want to?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I would say, which is probably like counterintuitive in the sense that like they're actually they used to be very very different before, right? Like earlier on, the B2C approach of building a product and B2B approach of building a product were rather different. And like if you started in one swim lane, you never went to the other swim lane pretty much your entire career. I think now, if you look at 2020, the winners in B2B are really like Slack and Zoom and
Yeah.
Zapier and all these products, which really inherit a lot of B2C instincts, right? And we're seeing that in 5.9 as well. And largely on the back of great product, like we've grown in the last 18 months from about 2.5 billion market cap to about 11.5 billion market cap, which is it's part of a cohort of SaaS stocks that have done really well in the last year or two. But even among those, the product led ones have done really well. And largely, one of the big things is now you can instrument your B2B product similar to instrumenting a B2C product, and you can get the same set of insights that can lead to product development decisions, right? And then the
Yeah.
other piece is the cycles are also shortening because most of your launch infrastructure is all in the cloud, whether you use Azure or GCP or AWS, all of them are competing for your business. And so the cycles are shortening. And, what does that remind you of, right? That's B2C development. If you can
Yeah.
instrument your product, if you can shorten the cycles, if you can build for your consumers, like that feels a lot like B2C. So I think the instincts are becoming a lot closer than they were before.
Yes, yes, I would agree to that. I mean, we have seen that the whole consumerization of enterprise software, even because the end users actually use so many consumer products, they want the enterprise products to behave as much as a consumer products that they use daily. So that's something we also have seen as expectations. So coming to the one, probably I'll ask this question on behalf of all the product leaders. Um, how do one how do you go about defining the product vision, strategy, roadmap, and metrics as a consumer product leader?
Yeah, I'll quote one of the leaders that I really respect in like tech focused business leaders, Keith Rabois, who was the CEO of Square, and he's invested in a number of companies that have like gone public and all this year,
Yep.
Open Door and DoorDash and so on. And one of the metaphors that he uses is that like building a product and building a successful business is a lot like making a movie, right? Like you have a vision, you convert it into a script, then you film the script to the best of your ability, and then you sell tickets to the movie, right? And I really believe in that approach to building businesses, which is like you have a vision, make it come to life to the best of your ability, you get the best team to like help you with every part of it, and then you get your consumers to like buy tickets to that movie, right? And so from that perspective, I think that um, uh, especially in a year like 2020, value proposition and vision makes a huge difference, because like people don't have a lot of time to like try out services that just aren't sure of themselves, right? And so once you sort of have that burning vision, and usually like what I've seen is like a lot of product leaders and founders like just personally experience or really align with the pain that users are feeling, right? And that pain could be either in like time that they could be saving, money they could be saving, just a better life that they could be living, like music app or social apps like Snap and other products, Facebook and so on, or Instagram. They have this kind of what the world looks like when this product is a part of it and is very successful. And largely they like endeavor to try to make subsequent iterations of that vision a reality, right? And The other thing I would say is that having said that, it's good to like start with a framework of like what kind of an app that you're building, right? Like for instance, if you go with the whole acquisition, engagement, frequency, retention, customer for life or subscriber kind of flow, of how a
Yep.
pipeline might look like in B2C. And in B2B, you've got the bookings, revenue, churn, NDR, net dollar retention
Yep.
kind of flow. Basically, you want to see kind of what kind of an app you're building, and therefore what the expected values of these metrics should be, right? Like to begin with. Um, and then at any point in your life cycle as a company, you're focused on maybe one metric for the most part, maybe two metrics at most, right? As trade-off metrics. And so, like, what I mean by be sure what kind of an app you're building is, like, I used to work on Messenger, and any day that the frequency is also really not really high, and the retention and engagement is also not really high, we should be very worried, right? Because messaging apps, just by their very definition, are high frequency use and high engagement, right? Like people use it every day, and when they use it multiple times, right? There's a lot of messages going back and forth. So if your app is not exhibiting those characteristics, you have to be worried, because it's not on its way to become a successful messaging app, right? Whereas if you compare that with like an open table like app, right? You can't expect daily engagement. Like no one's going to a restaurant with their family like every night, right?
Yep.
So just because they're not using it every night, you're not a failure as a product manager. And so you should have sort of that expected value, realistic view of like what success looks like. And then your metrics should add up to, like I said, like that's the movie you want to make. Like what are the indicators that you're on your way to, delivering on that vision?
Yes, yes, completely agreed, Anand. I think we of course, like we have customers across different verticals, and that's one thing we also put in benchmarks by vertical and so on, so that uh, it's not that, I mean, we have seen that for music apps the stickiness is very high, like 1:5 DA to MAU ratio and so on, and whereas different kind of apps have a different sort of a use case, and you need to really understand what sort of a use case that you are. So that's very helpful. And say, how would you consider like prioritizing the roadmap, right? Whether you're balancing customers' immediate requests for new features, or with obviously the long-term vision to deliver value, and that's always a challenging. So prioritization is a big part of the product process, and it's always challenging. Like how in any things that you have seen work well.
Yeah, I would say, you could use sort of any framing on this, right? You could start with a outcome, strategy, tactics framing, where essentially you're saying, like, with this release or in this quarter or in this year, like what is the outcome that we want, right? And what is the strategy to get there, and what are the tactics that I'm going to follow to deliver on that. Um, or you could sort of say, like, exactly what you said, like what are the various buckets in which I've got backlogs, right? There is things that my existing base is delivering, which is like not usually much of a trade-off if you don't have much of an existing base, right? Then like your
Yep.
entire focus is like on building that base that then you can start listening to get their
Yep.
ideas, right? So I think, like like I said, it's largely a function of like what state you are in. But I think the thing that I would make sure is, like, again, what is your very unambiguous out end state that you want to be in at the end of the year, or whether it's a period based determination or a kind of number of engineers based determination, or whatever you're trying to optimize for. And I think the only outcome that I think is suboptimal in these kinds of prioritization is that you take like whatever time you have and whatever resources you have, and kind of peanut butter them through every priority, right? Like
Hmm.
that's really the only way the product manager and the product leaders can shoot themselves in the foot, which is like it's not even clear what you have prioritized, because you've just like made everybody happy by giving them some resources, right?
Yeah.
And I think, like, my so I've like gotten used to saying this a lot, which is good prioritization usually means that um, everybody's a little disappointed, but nobody's surprised, right? So you basically have made your priorities super clear, and like everybody felt like they didn't get what they wanted. And like one or two areas got a lot of investment area, which like some product teams call swarming. So you basically take a lot of your resource and swarm around like one major outcome or two major outcomes. But the important thing is that people know exactly where you stand, and like I said, they might be disappointed, but they're not surprised by the outcome.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, what does like product-led growth mean for you, and how should one think about it in the consumer product context perspective? Yeah,
Yeah, again, I would like refer back to sort of this philosophy of building products, which is like take a vision, convert it to a manifestation, and then convince people to that worldview and that manifestation is the way forward for the industry and for the world, right?
yeah,
Which is like, before a certain movie existed, like, you had a very different view of the world, and somehow these guys convinced you that this movie and its view of the world is the right view of the world, right? They have now made you align with what they feel is the way you should look at something, right? And it could be a really small thing, which you see in some companies. It's a very, very deep focus on one very specific thing. Like if you take fitness, for instance, right?
yeah,
It would be like they're just making your run better, right? So they're not doing a lot of things, but like when you start running, this app is like incredible for you. Or they could be focused on a very broad subject, and they could like deliver value against that, right? And like a great example is a horizontal commerce app, right? So
yeah,
regardless of what you are trying to solve for, like once you have that approach, um, the two other things I would say are, one, every app has an atomic unit of value, right? Like for instance, in a commerce app, it is orders, right? It's a product being ordered. um, in a music app, it's a song being played, right? In a payments app, it's like, a payment being completed or a recurring payment being set up, right? So I would sort of develop a lot of clarity around like what is the unit that you want to grow, right? And let me give you like a example of like how you could do it in a way that's not the most optimal product led growth, right? So for instance, you could say, hey, I have a music app and I'm going to measure time spent and engagement, right? And so
mm,
people spending a lot of time on your app and scrolling up and down and finding it difficult to find songs, etc., could still count as a lot of time spent, but they're
yeah,
struggling to play the song, right? Meanwhile, you're paying a lot of licensing costs to the music players, and if they don't get played, then you're not making any profit for the cost that you put in into the app, right? So when I
yeah,
was like working on Wink Music, we actually did not even have the daily time spent or the minutes spent on the app as a metric that we looked at. It was somewhere in the back of the metrics deck. But the number one metric we looked for was songs played per day, right? And so, like, whether it was curation, whether it was product development, like whatever the team was, it was focused on songs played per day, right? And
mm,
that's good because like we've struck an umbrella deal for music, and so the more songs get played, the more it advances the worldview that we have around subscription music, right? And so I would like
yep,
determine the atomic value. And then the other thing I would say is, um, I think you had talked about earlier, like how does a product manager communicate to a product leader or or a business leader, right? I would actually like say something like somewhat mildly controversial, right? Which is, don't worry at all about that, right? Like it is the job of product leaders to like get into like who is delivering on the vision of the company in a very consistent way. And so the two things I would do are like get 1% better every day at your job, at your metric, at your product, like whatever the unit that you're measuring is. And
mm,
the other thing I would say is just like know their style of consuming information, right? You'll be surprised how many product leaders are okay just getting a weekly email from you, right? Just because they get an email from you doesn't mean they're not interested in your product, right? So I would just know what the style is that they consume information and give information to them in that style, right? Like some people like face-to-face meetings, some people like emails, some people like screenshots of your analytics and measurement product. So just understand that style, but focus on getting better on the job rather than like overly communicating to other people. Because ultimately, like if your product is doing well, smart people will swarm onto that part of the product.
makes sense. And if you look at and again coming to the growth uh, part of the discussion. So for driving growth in a consumer product company, we have also seen that, I mean, collaboration between product, marketing, and sort of even there's this growth teams as well, right? So the collaboration is very important. How do you kind of drive that alignment? Have,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, well, product can drive all the decisions, and marketing can just listen to product, right? No, I'm just joking. Um, uh, I think all jokes aside, I think the most important thing is so two things, right? And I'll use a personal story to kind of land home the point. So number one, I think you have to reduce the decisions to be made as much as possible, right? Like reduce the decisions to the fewest decisions that need to be made in a recurring basis, right? Like the more decisions that need to be made, the more the entropy around who needs to make it and how often, and like
It slows
all
down.
that. Yeah, so just like reduce the number of decisions getting made on at least the recurring ones. And then the important one is make the veto rights really clear between product and marketing, right? So I'll give you like an example of a very real example of something that I went through on what I mean by this. So we worked when I was at Airtel. We worked on revamping the My Airtel app, which was the start of the digital transformation effort, of the commerce business. And I think when I left, we were driving like over $1 million of GMV through that platform. Um, Over 7,000 crores of people paying their bills and adding new services and all that stuff. And I was running product, and my counterpart was running marketing, and he was a chief business officer. And basically, what we said was anything that was a product decision that had to do with like shipping code would be my veto, and anything that was outside of the app would be his veto right, right? And so let me tell you like how one of these manifested, right? So like we released the product. About a month or two later, we were going to run a pretty high decibel ad campaign and a 360-degree marketing campaign, right? um, so I saw the final TV commercial, and it was the worst TV commercial I've ever seen, like in my life, right? So it we had about like 75 to 80 amazing features on the product, right? And the entire TV commercial was about the sound that the app makes when it saves you money, right? And as a product guy and as a technical guy, I was like, this is the worst ad for this product, right? Like there are 80 features, including like turning off the network, turning on the network, going from 4G to 5G. Like those are all really incredible features. How the hell can you make an ad about like the sound of savings, right? And this is a real ad, right? I'm not like making the ad up.
Yeah.
And the marketing guy basically said, look, like you can say whatever you want, you can convince me, you can use facts, but like Monday morning, if I'm not convinced, like the ad is gonna hit the wires, right? And of course, like we did that. Like I was very unhappy. Like I was upset the whole weekend. It's the ad started on Friday night, and by Saturday morning, we were the number one app in India. So we beat Flipkart. And I was in a telco, right? Like no one expected a telco to have the number one app in India, and we beat Flipkart, we beat Facebook, we beat Paytm, like we beat all the so-called internet companies at the time. And over the weekend, we got calls from all our friends in every company saying like, "How the hell did you build a number one app?" Because the app works and the marketing worked. And I, for one, am so glad that like no one listened to my views on a TV commercial just because I was a senior executive, right? It
Yeah.
clearly worked despite me disagreeing with it. And so, like having the veto rights makes it super clear, like who has the decision to make. But also, honestly, it freed me up to like not be burdened by the decision and just finding evidence to convince the other guy, and knowing that at the end of the day, I didn't control the decision, right? And so I would say that's why I feel really strongly that between the product and the marketing teams, make as few decisions as possible and make the veto
Yeah.
rights as clean and clear as possible.
Yep. That makes sense. And you once you'll have to keep disagreeing and committing still always. So
Yeah, it's exactly right.
yep, that makes sense. I think I'll ask one last question from my side before we go to the audience Q&A. So coming to your angel investments, right? I think you probably have invested in quite a bit of companies. How few questions there? How many companies have you invested in? How do you choose which ones you invest into? And because many of these companies that I have seen that you invested in are early stage in nature, what do you see in them?
Yeah, so not surprisingly, like they're fairly aligned with this framework that we talked about, right? So largely, founders who have like a vision for what worldview they would like to see, and just as a so I've been investing now for 7 years or so, 6 or 7 years, and over 50, 60 companies, and I would say the best leading indicator for me is the founder ambition is higher than it's ever been, right? Like I think I don't know what I would have been capable of doing if I had this kind of ambition in my early 20s, right? Like I barely wanted to graduate undergrad and like get a job that didn't suck. And that was the extent of my ambition in my early 20s. But I chat with, a lot of the founders that we are all kind of inspired by who are in their 20s, and the management teams that they build. And the founder ambition is just incredible, right? And that's, I think, great for the country. I think that's great for the economy. That's great for people seeking employment because the jobs are going to be more fun. Um, and then the other thing I look for is just what I call boring businesses that like no one will care about until it explodes. So a great example of this is like one of my earliest investments, probably like second or third check that I wrote was to a company called Rupeek Finance, where it was like a IIT graduate who like got into the fairly ugly and boring business of gold loans in India, right?
Yeah, I
Like
know Sumit.
yeah, so Sumit Maniar so basically like you mortgage gold right before you can I give up on life. Like it's that so low in the hierarchy. It's not exactly the sexiest idea for a consumer business. And how Sumit looked at it was he just looked at it as it was a low NPS experience and highly fragmented, and the consumer was not being served well, and as a result young people did not take out gold loans, right? That was his big insight, is that they had a lot of gold which they probably got when they were getting married or from the parents or something, but they couldn't
Yeah.
use it to get an MBA or start a business or start a family or take a vacation. And so he built this business. And you know what, like when a business when a large company comes from America to build a company in India, they're not going to compete with Rupeek, right? Like it's super boring, like in the backwater somewhere. So I, love businesses like that, and have been lucky to be a part of a bunch of businesses, including MoEngage, and it's I'm really excited about the founders we get to see today.
That's great, Anand. So I'll probably take some questions from the audience Q&A. Uh,
Yeah.
I think definitely I'll let everyone put in their questions. So there's a question: how do we drive growth when you have a good product but has obvious gaps? But filling those gaps will take time and is time consuming. It's a
Yeah.
interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that because it, like most product management jobs, it presents a trade-off, right? Like it's not all black or white. I guess like I would try to dig into like because it's clear that it's a good product, try to find out who it is most relevant to and see, like are they already ready to buy or use the product based on what kind of a product it is. Because I don't know if those gaps are stopping just those core users themselves from using the product or just in terms of expansion. And so if it is, at a place where you can get product market fit for a certain set of users, I would focus deeply on getting to product market fit rather than fixing the gaps that might lead to expansion, right? However, if you don't have product market fit as your metrics are showing, and people are coming back in the way you're expecting them to come back for that category, then like you have to remind yourself that you don't have product market fit yet, and like you haven't earned the right yet to build new features and additional capabilities and gaps and so on, you have to just work obsessively towards finding the product market fit first.
Yeah, I completely agree to that. And sometimes when we are PMs and when we're inside in, sometimes we feel there are always gaps that we only see, always keep seeing as well, by the way.
Yeah.
So I think let me take this question more about where does consumer knowledge come into picture while launching a unique product? I think it's quite broad, but if you have anything to add there,
Yeah, I mean, I would say, there's a really nice post by Paul Graham called "Do Things That Don't Scale,"
yeah,
right? Like that's the one that comes to mind. I think, like, while you want to learn a lot from the analytics platform, you want to learn a lot from the insights that you gain, you want to learn a lot from the user research, etc. There's nothing that replaces like just walking out and meeting one of your users and just like, not even asking them any questions, but just observing what they do with your product, right?
yeah,
And just the level of insight that you get from watching them do what they do, and just doing it once and then never repeating it for a year doesn't lead to any dividends. But if you do it regularly, I've gotten, like, a lot of dividends out of that. I'll probably combine this answer with the one from Samir, which is, what is the scrappiest, most clever thing?
yeah,
So I have two answers to that. One is, like when I was still new to developing products in India, I'd actually gone to Lucknow to meet users. And we went to India's largest state, and the state capital, and went to the outskirts to talk to one guy. I'm not joking. Like, I saw a guy download a music app, listen to music, delete it, download a messaging app, message all his friends about that song, delete the messaging app, download the music app again, and continue to listen to songs, right? And so we had been talking about all these users who don't have enough memory on their phones, and as a
yeah,
result, they're downloading an app like multiple times. And you have to instrument your app, your product, for unique downloads, not total aggregate downloads, right? And I found that in the same day he had downloaded my app like 9 times. And like we were counting it as 9 users, 9 downloads, right? This is like, I'm
yes,
talking 5 6 years ago. And so I thought, like, if we hadn't gotten super scrappy and like gone out into the streets and watched this user on a device with no memory, like, we wouldn't have brought back this penetrating insight that a lot of people are doing that, right? The other thing I would say is, um, oftentimes there is a well-known adage that you build products for yourselves. You build products that you want to use, right? One funny story was that when we were building Wink Music, we would take all this like really cool looking music, like, we bought Pink Floyd to India for the first time when they announced a new album, the same day as their launch on Spotify, and we put that up on the front screen, and like maybe like 15 people like me and like all the people on this webcast were all very excited about it. But like the moment you have an exclusive song from a new Salman Khan movie, you would have a million plays within 24 hours, right? So I think the clever thing that I guess I learned from that was, like, know when to build a product for yourself and know when to build a product for your actual users, not just for yourself. And don't, like, keep repeating all these like things that you hear from people, that you have to build for yourself, because sometimes you might be a Pink Floyd fan and not everyone is a Pink Floyd fan.
yeah, yeah. That's completely. I agree to that. I There are a good number of questions that came up. I'm just looking at how much time we have.
Go ahead.
Sandeep, you can.
Yeah, take. You can take another one or two. That's okay.
Anand, do you want to pick any question from the Q&A?
um there's I think one question around like freemium and best way to drive business for a B2B product.
Sure.
Yeah, I would
It's,
I would say, the mindset of a land grab. I really like that. I think with B2B, the good news is you can charge upfront for your product, and people will not pay unless they see value. And so the more unique the problem statement is that you're solving for, again, the more boring the better, because you are appealing to the person who's paying money to have this problem solved. And so your validation is pretty quick, right? And then you can find customers just like that and go repeat the process with them. So like if you're not getting quick and immediate traction, and then customers expanding their usage in short order, right, within like a couple of quarters, then you're probably building the wrong product or a limited product. So I would say your approach absolutely feels like the right approach to me in terms of trying to start with a freemium concept and land grab mindset. Like that's how I would think about it as well. um
Do you want to? Uh,
do you see anything interesting, Ravi?
so I think there's a question about the streaming and OTT devices space. How do you see the streaming device and OTT devices space? What is the future in the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that if I look at what are the what changed drastically, I think like it's basically TikTok, right? Like that's the big delta in the space, because the way it used to be was that there was high quality produced content, and then there was UGC,
Yep.
and it was really like no overlap between the two. And so basically the networks that own the high quality produced content could drive whatever subscription prices they wanted, right?
Yes.
And I think like with the emergence of TikTok, the line has significantly blurred to the point where like TikTok has much better produced content than a lot of networks and music videos and stuff like that these days. And so the line has significantly blurred, and there's Mitron TV and like Chingari and like all of these companies that have emerged with the TikTok
Yep.
ban. And I think that that is a huge opportunity in India. And I think it's also great because India has just so much creative talent that all I feel like they've gotten
Yep.
a voice and an audience, and they don't have to be at the mercy of a few large companies and families and conglomerates that own all the production facilities and so on. So I think there's just like a ton of opportunity there, and sounds like entrepreneurs are taking advantage of this.
Yes, yes, I completely agree. And we do work with multiple UGC companies, ShareChat, Trell, Nitron, Proposo. So we have seen them growing very well, and that actually, like you mentioned, that kind of removes the whole barrier for them to kind of grow and scale. So definitely makes sense.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think there's one. Samir seems to be having good questions. What are your
yeah.
least favorite aspects of product management? Um,
Yes.
I would say like I really like almost every part of product management. And there's a famous Bill Clinton quote saying that like whatever is not good about it can be fixed with whatever is good about it. So like and I think that's true of product management in general. Like if you don't like some part of it, like the way you fix it is like based on what you love about it. You wake up the next morning and you remember like why you became a product manager to begin with, right? But the biggest thing I would say, and this is probably like a good note to end on, is that like someone one of my colleagues at Facebook said that the greatest product managers are glory funnels and shit umbrellas, right? Which is like when something great happens, they funnel it to the entire team and they don't keep all the credit for glory. And when like something becomes really bad and like there's some crap falling on the team, like they hold an umbrella over the team, and they take most of the crap so that their team is not impacted. And so like I think like that's really stuck with me over the years, and I think it's a fantastic metaphor for like how the best product managers operate.
Yes, yes, that's completely agree. And what I have seen product managers don't like is to hear from engineering managers about, hey, we have a tech debt, we need to fix it, we need to do a revamp. Those are probably the things that I have seen product managers don't like as well. So
Yeah. There is a interesting question. What is your take on Quibi? Do we have 30
Yep.
seconds?
Yep.
Um, that's actually a really good one, Aman. Thank you for asking. I would say, the biggest learning from Quibi is actually the head of product at Quibi is one of the smartest people in media. Is Tom Conrad, who ran Pandora product management, and built a fantastic app.
Yep.
Um, I think the problem is you can't buy product market fit is probably the biggest lesson, right? Just because you raised a ton of money, um, you can't rush the process of buying product market fit. And if I were them, I would have probably raised less money, like you given the product team more leeway. And like, it sounds very strange, but they made COVID work against them, because they had all this like marketing planned and all that. Whereas, like, if they had allowed for organic growth and stuff like that, there is a good chance that they could have grown the same way all the other OTT players grew during the pandemic, where people were
Yes.
home, nothing to do. So it's kind of unfortunate that they kind of let an opportunity slip in that sense.
Got it. Thanks, Anand.